Hello everyone, and welcome to our new series, Police Encounters, where we're going to talk about the laws and your rights as a citizen when you are encountered by the police. We'll begin the series and kick it off with episode number 1, where we talk about what are your rights and what are the laws that govern a police encounter while you're in a vehicle. Welcome to episode 1 of Police Encounters. Today we're going to talk about the laws that govern and your rights as a citizen when you're pulled over by the police. We're going to break this down into 3 different episodes, where the first episode we're going to talk about the basic police encounter in a vehicle. Being pulled over, what to do during the traffic stop, how to end the traffic stop, and how you can best be prepared for the traffic stop. In episode 2, we're going to talk about more advanced things that happen on an escalated police stop, and up to including arrest. And then in episode 3, we're going to discuss some more advanced issues that might come up during a police stop. Things such as a standardized field sobriety test and blood draws and breathalyzers, and, checkpoint stops, searches while you're in a vehicle. So we'll deal with those more specific, nuanced things in episode 3. But before we get started, let me introduce myself real quickly here. My name is Brett Knight. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Tennessee, where I practice at the law office of Fry, Knight, and Looper. So this is, again, just one of our beginning of our series of police encounters, and we're going to talk about other things throughout the series, such as police encounters in your home, at work, at school, in the public. But the whole purpose of this series is to simply pass on information and hopefully help people that encounter the police, so that it's a situation where maybe you're not needing to hire an attorney, maybe you knew what to happen, but also to kind of minimize the stress. It's a very stressful thing when you get pulled over by the police. So in this series, we're going to talk, just kind of share information and talk about the laws and your rights and some best practices about what to do. And I'll say here at the very beginning, it's going to be a kind of a balanced approach. That's my goal here. I want a balanced approach to this topic. I've seen lots of videos, extreme one way or the other. On one side, you'll watch a video and they pretty much tell you, you do whatever the police say, forget about your rights, just surrender your rights. And then the other extreme is, don't do anything the police say, roll your window down just this much and be very confrontational with the police. I don't think either of those work well. In my experience, and I handle hundreds of criminal cases every year in the state of Tennessee, I'm a former prosecutor, so I've been on both sides of the criminal defense side of things that can happen at a traffic stop, during a traffic stop, after a traffic stop, both as a prosecutor for the state and as a defense attorney now in private practice. I don't think either of those 2 extreme approaches work. I think what works best is something somewhere in the middle, where you're protecting your rights that you have, your constitutional rights that you have, you're protecting yourself, but at the same time you're recognizing that the law enforcement's there, they're trying to do a job, and there's things that you can do to speed along that traffic stop and get it to a better conclusion. So that's kind of the approach we're going to take here today. So let's begin with the stop. Why am I getting pulled over? I think most of us have been there, and if you've not been there, you're one of the fortunate ones. I think most of us have been there, where we're driving down the road, kind of regular day, maybe we're sitting listening to a radio or an audio book, and all of a sudden you see the blue lights in your mirror, and your blood pressure goes sky high, and you're like, why in the world am I getting pulled over? Maybe you know, but maybe you don't. But you're wondering, why am I getting pulled over? Well, the reasons that a police officer can pull you over is pretty simple. If they have a reasonable belief or suspicion that you have broken the law, then they can initiate a traffic stop to further investigate whatever's going on. Now, that suspicion could be you're driving too fast. It could be your window tint is too dark. It could be your license is expired, or you don't have the lights on the license plate. Could be that they recognize you, or that you meet the description of somebody who's that they're investigating for having violated another crime. Could be that the manner in which you're driving appears that you might be under the influence. You could be swerving or lane of traffic. Could be all kinds of things. So there is a whole list of reasons why you could be pulled over. And you may have a suspicion of why you're being pulled over, but you don't really know until the officer tells you. You might think you're getting pulled over because you're going too fast, and it could be that you're really getting pulled over because your registration is expired. So that's the first thing, is to understand, is that we don't really know why you're getting pulled over until you're told why you're getting pulled over. And that leads into other things, such as how to answer certain questions. We'll get to that here in just a minute. But before we do, I think another area to talk about is, once you realize that it's you that's being pulled over and the police officer's behind you and they've initiated their lights, where do you pull over? Okay. This is one of those where I've argued this in court. I've been able to successfully argue this in court. I've talked with many young people who are just beginning to drive. At least in the state of Tennessee and in most jurisdictions, but I'll only be able to speak specifically to the state of Tennessee, you have a right, you should pull over immediately when it's safe. And that's the key part there, when it's safe. If it's safe to pull over and there's a large shoulder and you can pull over, safely pull over, and you believe it would be safe for the officer to get out, or you, if you're asked to get out, to be able to get out without interfering with traffic or putting yourself in danger, then you can do that. However, you have a right to pull over in an area where you feel that it's safe, where it's well lit, where it's public. So if you're afraid, for example, you're in the vehicle by yourself and lights come on behind you, but it's a very untraveled road, you have a right to go to a lit, more public space, such as a parking lot, or something along that lines. However, I will caution you that if you just keep driving like normal to this parking lot, you may be picking up an evading charge, which you'll then have to defend or hire an attorney to defend you. What I recommend is this: when you see the traffic light, the lights come on behind you, the blue lights or the blue and red lights, depending on your jurisdiction. Here in Tennessee, it's blue lights. When you see the blue lights come on, you know that officer is trying to stop you. What I do, what I recommend doing, is turn your hazard lights on and slow down. That will alert the officer that you recognize that you're being pulled over and that you're not trying to evade. You're not trying to outrun them or anything else. But by turning on the hazard lights and slowing down, not too slow, you don't want to let them run into you or cause a traffic issue. And then exit, if you're on a highway or something, exit the next available exit and find the next available place that you feel is a safe place to park. And again, that could be a parking spot, it could be a side road, you could pull off of a heavily trafficked area onto a side road that's more safe. But you need to find the next available one, because if you continue just to drive by places because you're trying to find something that's more convenient for you, that's not what you're allowed to do. You're allowed to find a safe place, not your preferred place. So you can't just keep driving thinking, well, I live a couple miles down the road, I'm just going to drive on home and do this in my parking lot. You can't do that. You have to pull over at the next available safe space, and you have to be able to argue that in case they challenge it. So a parking lot that's well lit, a Walmart parking lot or wherever you happen to be driving by, that's the best place to go if you don't feel safe. If you feel safe and there's a large enough shoulder on the side of the road, by all means pull over there. So again, the idea is to pull over at the first available safe space where the officer can then come up and approach you and talk with you. So what do you do once you pull over? And I will say this too: as you're pulling over and you hit your hazard lights, turn your radio off, down, volume down, whatever. Turn it down, focus on what's going on, and later on you're going to want that radio down anyway, but you don't want to be messing with the radio while the officer is approaching. So turn that down as you're driving, you hit your hazard lights, slow down, turn down your radio. Pull over into a safe area. And then what do? Well, keep your hazard lights on. That's again, keep those on unless the officer instructs you to turn them off. Keep your seatbelt on. And I've had many people who I know personally who they get pulled over, and what's the first thing they do? They take their seatbelt off because they want to reach over to their glove box and get their paperwork out. Don't do any of that. Don't take off your seatbelt. Don't reach over to your glove box. Do not try to get your paperwork. Do not get your paperwork yet. It's not the appropriate time. When the officer's approaching from the back, and I've spent time talking with many officers about this topic, when they're approaching from the back, they're in this high state of alert. and for their own safety. I understand that. They don't know what they're about to encounter in the vehicle. So give them every indication that this is not something that they need to be concerned about. Don't be reaching over and grabbing things that they don't know what you're grabbing. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Your radio is already down. Your hazard lights are already on. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Do not take off your seatbelt. Wait for the officer to approach. Go ahead and roll down your windows if you like. If it's nighttime, maybe you hit the little dome light button. And again, that's to help de-escalate this situation, to allow this officer to go from I don't know what I'm about to face to a more standard routine traffic stop. The quicker they get there, the better your encounter is going to be. So dome light if it's dark, windows down, hands on the steering wheel. Do not take your seatbelt off. Do not get your paperwork yet. If you were on the phone when you got pulled over, get off the phone. If you feel unsafe getting off the phone, for example, I've had young people say that they didn't feel safe. They wanted, somebody on the phone. Then that's fine. Leave the phone on if you want. Make sure it's on hands-free. In the state of Tennessee, the phone has to be on hands-free anyway. But the officer may tell you have to turn the phone off. And the officer can tell you to turn the phone off during the traffic stop. There is statutes in the state of Tennessee that for officer safety, they want you off the phone. And I kind of understand that. The reason being that they don't want you on the phone with somebody in case you're calling somebody to come help you that would cause the situation to be escalated. So be off your phone unless there's some specific reason to stay on it. Get off your phone and let the officer just speak with you. And again, if you believe that it's a safety issue and that you want to be on the speakerphone, then you can alert the officer to that. When I get pulled over, and I've been pulled over before, I have a truck with 4 doors, and so I have 4 separate windows, and the back windows are more tinted than the front, and I think that's pretty common. I go ahead and roll down my back windows. Unless it's pouring down rain outside or snow, I will go ahead and as I pull over, hands on the steering wheel, I'll roll down all the windows. And the reason I do that is, as the officer's approaching, you can kind of imagine, and again, I spoke with many officers, they're looking to see who's in this vehicle, and if I can roll the back windows down a little bit, and they can walk by and look and see that there's nobody in the back seat, again, it de-escalates the situation. You don't have to, there's no law that says you have to, but this is just one of those things that makes it for a more professional encounter, an easier encounter, a quicker encounter. Again, our goal is to get you back on the road and get back in your day. So I'll roll down the back windows, roll down the front window, and that way when the officer's approaching, they can see clearly, okay, there's nobody in there, there's nothing that I have to be worried about in there, and then they're just going to focus on me and deal with me. A lot of times I'll have, clients or just, people in general that will ask me, can I record the police during the traffic stop? And the answer is yes, you can. More courts recently have recognized, and it's a modern recognition of the court, that you have a First Amendment right to be able to record police during the commission or of their regular duties, or while they're on duties or duty, or while they're doing things that are a function of their job. So yes, you can record. That's one of those things you probably need to have prepared ahead of time. If you want to be able to record the police encounter, and I'm not opposed to that, but if you want to record the police encounter, you need to kind of have set that up. You need to have some kind of a device in your vehicle, for example, that holds your phone. You don't need to be holding your phone in the police officer's face. At that point, they could feel that that's a safety issue. You need to have some place where you can set the phone and hit the record button and then not touch the phone again. You don't need to be messing with your phone while the police are there for several reasons. One, they're not going to want you to. They have a right to tell you to get off your phone. We talked about that earlier. Also, you don't want your phone open, because if your phone is open during the police encounter, they could see something on your phone that makes them suspicious of some activity, and now all of a sudden you've escalated the situation. So have some device that holds your phone that you can just simply hit the record button and move on from it if that's what you're wanting to do. But you do have a right, and courts have recognized a constitutional right to be able to record police in most situations like that. So that's the basic stop. Now here comes the officer, walking up, and maybe they're going to walk up on the driver's side, maybe they're going to walk up on the passenger side. I've seen them do both. And so now you've engaged in the actual encounter itself. The police officer comes up, and now you're encountering them. And the first thing that I will remind everybody or tell everybody or give advice to, when that officer approaches, remember, smile, you're on camera. And I say that kind of jokingly, but I'm being very serious. Most police officers are wearing body camera or they have dash camera. You should assume that you are probably being video recorded and audio recorded. And there's nothing that hurts your case more than a bad attitude right from the beginning, an aggressive, confrontational attitude right from the beginning, or being overly gushy and admitting to things that you don't need to be talking about right off the bat in a video. So remember, everything that you are doing and saying and how you present yourself is going to be presented as evidence at some point. So just remember that. Be professional, be polite. Again, I say that all the time. I see videos and people are, they're just very kind of just mean to the officers and aggressive with the officers. And I've seen officers who are aggressive and mean with people right off the bat. Neither of those are going to be productive. The best thing you can do is be professional and polite. Now, I'm not saying be gushy, because that's counterproductive. I also see people who, I don't really understand why, but during a police encounter, they begin, yes, sir, and oh, please, sir, and I love police, and I support the police, and that may all be well and good, and there's nothing wrong with supporting the police, and whether it be through some group function or just personally feeling like you support the police. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing, but this isn't the time and place for that. One, it's very self-serving sounding. It sounds like you're trying to essentially to butter up the police officer so that you can get a better outcome. It doesn't work, first of all. And when that is presented as evidence in video form, you look very foolish and you look like you're trying to manipulate the situation. So just saying it, based on experience that I've had, the best thing you can do is be polite and be professional. Not be gushy, not be aggressive. Just be polite and professional. Remember, the police aren't your friends in these encounters. They're not your enemies either. They're not your friends. They're not your enemies. They're just doing their job. So you don't have to butter them up, and you don't need to be aggressive with them. They're just there trying to do their job. And recognize also that some do a better job of interacting with the public than others do. Some are just better at talking with people. They're humans, okay? So even if one comes and they're not being as polite and professional as you remain polite and professional. Okay, so here come the questions. Police officers approached. Let them speak first. Let them speak first. You don't need to say, hey officer, how are you doing today? Nothing. You don't need to say nothing. Your window's down, they've approached you, they've pulled you over, listen to what they have to say. And remember that the police are not under, and this is a misconception we see a lot, the police are under no obligation of law or policy and no duty to be open and honest with you. They are allowed to lie, absolutely 100% legally allowed to lie to you during their investigation, and some do as part of their investigative technique. They can overstate evidence against you in order to try to get you to admit to something. Those are all acceptable in the United States and in the courts, techniques used by officers. So remember that when they're asking you questions as well. Wait for them to ask the question, and don't admit to anything. That's the biggest thing. Don't admit to anything. Most common question the officer's going to present to you when they first approach is, they're going to say, do you know why I pulled you over? Don't fall for it. It's a trick question. Of course you don't know why they pulled you over. You might think you know, but you don't know unless you're able to read their minds. And if so, please call me and tell me how you can do that. I'd love to be able to. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to know what people are thinking. But anyway, you don't know. So don't admit to something and don't present information out there, because the worst thing you can do at that point is say, yeah, I was driving a little reckless, or oh, I was driving too fast. I knew I was driving too fast. I just, again, that's where you begin that kind of, verbal, spilling out of information that you just don't need to do. Your answer is no, because you don't know. There's no way you could know. You only suspect why they pulled you over. So don't give them a reason to continue this investigation any further. Again, the point of this interaction is to make it as brief as possible and as professional as possible. So when the question is asked, do you know why I pulled you over? The answer is no, I don't know. No, sir. No, officer, I don't. And let them tell you, well, you were going a little bit fast, or I saw you cross the line there, or you didn't use a turn signal when you came out to there. And then your answer is, again, not an admission. It's okay, or all right, or nothing. That's even a better answer, just simple silence. Don't feed into the exploration. And remember, they don't have to be open and honest with you about their questions. They could simply state something that they suspect, hoping that you will reinforce that suspicion or maybe make an admission. So do not answer any questions that you don't have to answer. And there's very few questions that you have to answer. The next thing they're going to ask is for your registration, license, insurance. Okay, and this is one of those other things where hopefully you've prepared ahead of time. And you have your registration, copy of your registration, copy of your insurance with you. And preferably what I recommend to people when I do in my own vehicle is I have an envelope. And in it is my registration and my insurance card. And it sits on the visor. It's got a little clip and it goes into the visor. And it sits there so that when the officer were to ask me for my registration and insurance, I simply have to lift my visor down, pull the envelope out, and hand it to them. It's there. I'm not digging through my console or my glove box, because what are you doing when you have to go digging for your information? You're opening up more opportunities for the officer to kind of develop some suspicion. They may feel that you not being able to find your paperwork is a sign of impairment. They may be looking over your shoulder the whole time to see if there's anything in your vehicle that makes them suspicious. Could be something as innocent as an empty prescription bottle, where my prescription has ended and I have an empty bottle in there, or just a bottle in there, and that might be enough for them to become suspicious on what it is that you have in your vehicle. Again, a firearm in your vehicle, again, that creates more situations, more safety issues. So have your paperwork available. I do not recommend it being in your console or your glove box or any place where other items can be stored. I store it simply in an envelope on my visor. It's the only thing there. I reach up, I hand it over, I get my wallet, I tell the officer, my ID's in my wallet. I let them know what I'm doing. I reach in my wallet, I pull out my ID, and I hand it to them. And then that's it. I don't answer any other questions. If they ask questions such as, have you been drinking tonight? Where are you coming from? Those are questions that they're allowed to ask, and those are questions you are allowed to not answer. And I would recommend, again, you have a right to remain silent. I would recommend you use it as often as you possibly can. And this is one of those situations where you can. You don't fall for the trick questions and the misleading questions, such as, where are you coming from? You could get that wrong. You could say, well, I'm coming from here, and well, that's not the direction you're coming from. Well, they don't understand that you stopped at the post office on the way. It just opens up the door for prolonging this investigation, prolonging this encounter, and again, our goal is to make it quick and easy. So I don't recommend answering those questions. You can be polite and professional still and say, I'm not going to, answer those questions, or I've been advised to not answer questions during a traffic stop. Or you could just simply say, officer, I've given you the documentation that you need. I don't want to answer any further questions, and then go from there. They could keep asking you questions, and you have a right to keep saying, I'm not answering questions, investigation. And if they become very, very persistent on it, most officers, experienced officers, understand that they shouldn't. Most officers know that they can ask these exploratory questions, but you can also not answer them and refuse to answer them. And eventually they recognize also that they only have a reasonable amount of time to address the reasons that they pulled you over. So they can't stay there forever exploring additional things and trying to dig into things that they either don't have a reasonable suspicion of, or that you've not given them some reasonable suspicion of, or wasn't the reason or the purpose that they pulled you over to begin with. So that's how, again, the purpose of this video is to talk about how you shorten the length of those encounters so that you can go about your day. And that's one of the ways in which you do it. You have a right to not answer these exploratory investigative questions. You have an absolute right to not answer those. And that will shorten this encounter. Usually at the point that the officer recognizes that they've either asked the questions and you've not answered them, and that you've given them the information that they've asked for that you're required to give them, they'll go back to their vehicle and they'll run your license, make sure it's valid. They'll check to make sure there's no warrants for your arrest. They'll make sure that the registration for the vehicle is valid. And they will then come back up and then give you your paperwork back. And again, put your paperwork right back in that envelope, right back into the visor. No reason to dig anywhere else or anything else. If you did happen to have pulled them out of your glove box or your console and you didn't have it prepared ahead of time, my recommendation is you take your paperwork, just put it on the seat next to you. No reason to open up those storage areas again to allow this encounter to be expanded. And let the officer go about his day. And that's what you're hoping that happens at this point. At this point, they give you your information back. Maybe you get a ticket. Maybe you get a citation. And if it's something more advanced and there's a warrant for your arrest, or they want to continue this further, they ask you to get out of the vehicle. They ask you to submit to a standardized field sobriety test. Those are issues we're going to cover in episode 2 of this series, where we talk about the escalation of the police encounter in your vehicle. So we'll deal with those and search issues and all those laws and rights in episode 2. But as for episode 1 here, the typical encounter, the encounter that we're going to have 90% of the time in our vehicle, this should conclude the encounter. The police officer should give you your information back. They are not allowed to keep your license as a way of keeping you there once they've taken reasonable time to explore the purpose that they pulled you over. They should give you your information back and you should be free to go. If for some reason they are holding your license and they're trying to continue to explore things that you don't want to answer, you can ask, officer, am I free to go? If you've given me my citation, you've given me my ticket, am I free to go? And the answer is almost always is going to be yes, you're free to go. They don't have to tell you that you're free to go. You may have to ask, am I free to go at this point? And that's if you have a very aggressive officer. Most of the time, they're going to give you the information back and they're going to let you go about your day. So how do you end this encounter? Officer's giving your information back. They've told you you're free to go. What do you do now? Well, pretty simple, but make sure that officer, you give them enough time to safely get back to their vehicle or to a safe area before you begin to go. Make sure you've got your seatbelt put back on in case you've taken it off. Make sure you put your blinker on. And don't immediately jump on the phone calling your husband or your wife or somebody. Wait until you're further down the road and then do that however the law allows, whether hands-free or whatever. Just focus on what you're doing as you're leaving. No reason to speed out of the location. Use a safe speed. Double check. Make sure that you're safe to get back onto the road, and then get back on the road and go about your day. So just to recap what we've talked about here in the typical encounter with a police officer while in your vehicle, the reasons you can be stopped, there's many. The big takeaway here is don't give additional information that you don't need to give. It just prolongs the encounter. Our purpose here is to shorten the encounter. Go about your day doing the things that you were doing before you were pulled over. Professional and polite. Make sure you've done the things, you've gotten to a safe area, that you've rolled your windows down, that your radio is turned down, hands on the steering wheel. Wait till you're asked for your paperwork. Don't get it. Have your paperwork prepared ahead of time in an envelope, on your visor, or someplace that's not in a storage area. If you're going to record the encounter, if you want to record the encounter, make sure you plan that ahead of time, that you have something that holds your phone or whatnot so that your hands are free to be able to do that. Don't answer questions that you don't need to answer. The only real questions that you need to answer is giving the officer the information about your identity, your driver's license, your insurance, and your registration. Any other questions are exploratory. They're trying to make something more of the stop than the reason that they pulled you over. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and you found it useful. And again, just kind of recapping, professional and polite. Don't answer questions you don't need to answer. Make sure you're prepared and know what to do before you're pulled over so that the encounter is as brief and as easy as it can possibly be. If, however, you are in a situation or you're interested in what happens in a situation, what you should do, and something that's more escalated than this standard casual encounter with the police in a vehicle, then watch episode 2. We're going to talk about the escalation process of a police stop, of an encounter while you're in a vehicle, and talk about what that looks like. And then in episode 3, we're going to talk about specific kind of nuanced issues that you might encounter in a police encounter while you're in your vehicle. Things such as standardized field sobriety tests, search and seizure issues, and many, many more things. So please join us on those episodes as well. I think you'll find them very interesting. And of course, we'd like you to follow our YouTube page here and subscribe to get notifications when we put out new videos so that you can see the rest of these episodes, but also other discussions we're going to have about police encounters, such as police encounters in your home, police encounters at school, police encounters in the public. And then of course we have other series as well outside of these police encounters where we talk about the law, your rights, the Constitution, and a whole list of other topics. So please follow us and subscribe to our videos, and we'll see you on episode 2. Hey everybody, I'm Brett Knight from the Law Office of Fry, Knight, and Looper. We hope you've enjoyed watching these video episodes. We just want to clarify and make sure that everybody understands, the legal disclaimer that we always put on these videos, that these videos are put up there for information only. It's not legal advice. And the reason you can tell that it's not legal advice is, in order for us to give you legal advice, we'd have to be aware of your very specific and particular circumstances so that we could advise you based upon those circumstances. The law has a lot of gray areas, and unless we know those specific things going on with you, we can't really give you legal advice. So these videos are for information and entertainment only, and of course are not legal advice. And anybody watching these videos, that doesn't create a client-attorney privilege between us. That's something that would have to take place in our office. And of course, if you ever want to reach out to us and to get specific legal advice, you may do so. However, these videos are not meant or created to do that. Take care and have a great day.